Lietuvos prodiuserių asociacijos direktorė. Ačiū, kad susirinkot. Šiandien turėsim susitikimą su John Colley, kuris yra ARRI Rental Apšvietimo departamento vadovas ir buvęs gafferis. John has a lot to tell us, and he promised us some secrets of gaffer work. So please take your seats and enjoy the thing. John?
Hi there, everybody. Thank you for having me, and thanking Debbie for inviting me, and the LAPA for sponsoring this event. And I'm very happy to share some of my experiences with you. I'd like to start with showing just a quick commercial with volume, and then we're going to show a few commercials in the background with volume while I chat, and then maybe some slideshows. And after we're finished, some Q&A. If you'd like to ask some questions, I'd love to answer any questions for you. So this is the very last job I ever worked on as a gaffer. It's a Jaguar advert, and it was shown at halftime of the Super Bowl. And here we go. Let's have a look.
Have you ever noticed how in Hollywood movies all the villains are played by Brits?
Maybe we just sound right.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you, Mary.
We're more focused. More precise.
Always one step ahead.
With a certain style, an eye for detail. And we're obsessed by power. Stiff upper lip is key.
And we all drive Jaguars.
Oh yes, it's good to be bad.
So as you can imagine, a commercial like that doesn't get shot in a day or so. That took 10 days to film in various parts of London, and getting a helicopter to fly down the streets of London, you can imagine the nightmare for the location people and all the different departments involved. But it was Tom Hooper, the director. Look him up, I'm sure hopefully you've heard of him. Now we're just going to play a few other commercials that I worked on in the background. Like I say, my name is Johnny Colley. I grew up in Vancouver in Canada. I moved to London, England around 25 years ago, and that's where I live now. I've worked on film sets for over 25 years. I started in Vancouver as a spark, but it wasn't until I moved to London that I started to work as a gaffer. I've been very fortunate to work with some talented people on some very exciting projects. The director of this was Jonathan Glacier, music video director and film director. Under the Skin I did with him just after this commercial. As a gaffer, I've done over 26 feature films, 100 commercials, 100 music videos, TV, dramas, documentaries. I've shot 3 short films as a DOP and 6 music videos. 4 years ago, I was working on this Jaguar commercial, and I was approached by the executives of ARRI. Anybody here heard of ARRI?
Yeah.
At the time, I was using ARRI Lighting Rental in London as my primary lighting supplier when I worked as a gaffer. So I knew everybody there very well. As it turns out, their managing director was retiring after 30 years, and people at ARRI approached me and they asked me if I wanted to take over from him and become the new head of ARRI Lighting in the United Kingdom. They wanted somebody with industry knowledge and film experience, so they made me a proposal. At the time, I was a very busy guy. I was working on bigger and bigger projects every year. I'd never thought about doing anything else except being a gaffer. However, the working hours in a film career are pretty hectic. I saw my wife, my son, and my daughter on Sundays. So, not for the first time in my film career, I was presented with a very big decision. Now, and for the past 4 years, I'm the General Manager and Director of Business Development for ARRI Lighting Rental in the UK. I still get to visit sets occasionally, I still see my old friends, but I don't get yelled at by crazy Americans in a frozen field at 4 a.m. anymore. And I put my kids to bed every night. This was a commercial for BP. What was special about this one, it was the first time I'd worked with the cinematographer Eckhard Pollock. And on the way back from the airport, I had a hockey baseball cap on. And he asked if I played hockey, and I said yes. He asked if I had inline roller skates, and I said yes, I do. So for many of these scenes, I was with a camera on my shoulder or my hand or carrying under me, following the actors through the warehouses or through the art galleries with a camera behind them. It was a lot of fun, and I really had a great time on that video. So I'd like to explain my progression for you and how I got to be where I am now. I think it's very important for you all to realize that you're going to be defined by the choices that you make over the next few years, and you're going to need to be in a position to take advantage of the opportunities that are going to be given to you. I got my first camera when I was 10 years old, and since then I think I've taken and saved over 100,000 photographs. At an early age, I became fascinated by the interpretation of the photographer's lens and the hidden meaning behind a lot of photographs. As a boy, I learned how to shoot time lapse, how to bracket for different exposures, how to use filters and neutral densities to affect the color and the depth of field. But most important of all, I became fascinated by light. Where did the camera need to be to make the light, natural light especially back then, look more interesting? It was a hobby for me long before I would choose a career in filmmaking. Without realizing anything at the time, this hobby provided me with a basic understanding of all the principles that I would later become obsessed with in my later job. In my youth, like most Canadian boys, I played ice hockey in the winter and lacrosse in the summer. I dreamed of being a professional hockey player. I didn't quite make it as a professional, but I can tell you that all of those teams that I played on, all of the experiences I had on those teams, did teach me some very important values. Teamwork, structure, and being responsible for the task that's given to you. I don't want to preach, but trust me, these are the qualities that will get you noticed and get you jobs when you're looking for opportunities in the future. Keywords on any resume these days are communication, teamwork, planning, organization. Any resume you want to put out to people, any message you want to give to people, these are the qualities that people are going to be looking for. When I left school, I started an electrical apprenticeship with a construction firm, and for 10 years I worked in the hydro dams and power stations in northern Canada. And it was there that I learned all the very basic principles of electricity: volts, amps, watts, grounding, bonding, all very basic principles when you get to know them. But in my opinion, without this knowledge and training, you cannot call yourself an electrician. Certainly not on a hydro dam, but especially on a film set. I urge any of you, if you want to have a career in lighting, to go and get some understanding of electricity, because it wants to kill you. And I'm serious about this. Not only that, all the people around you on set are counting on you to keep them alive. It wasn't until I was in my early 30s that I got my first opportunity to work on a film set. I took a break from the hydro dams and some friends invited me to a week-long commercial. I spent that week as a runner. So I went from being a foreman of 20 men to making tea, driving people around, getting shouted at, working crazy hours. It was me relaxing on set. Working crazy hours and getting shouted at some more. I was loving it. it was around that time that I went back to the Hydro Dam, and I gave them my notice, and I decided that I was going to work in the film industry. Starting out wasn't easy. Nobody knows you. You don't know anything useful. You don't know what anything is called. I had to learn a whole new language of what the equipment was called. The first year in Vancouver was really difficult to get established. There was lots of competition. I always knew I had my electrical qualifications to fall back on, but I was determined to carry on. In 1997, I had an opportunity to play ice hockey in London, England. So I had a new start. Almost immediately, I looked for film contacts. They were out there, I just had to find them, and I did. Short films, low budget, no budget. I could play hockey and look for opportunities in filmmaking. I knew it was all about contacts. I worked on anything and everything that came my way. Some of it for free, and a lot of it for very low money. Over the years, the contacts grew. The favors started to come back to me. DOPs, directors, producers, actors who were trying to get showreels together. It's all a very connected network. My attitude, my attention to details, and my enthusiasm were starting to pay off. Soon I found myself working with some of the people I'd been watching on TV and in the cinema. At first, I would look around myself at set sometimes and think, holy crap, this is really happening. So I'm also very interested in what made some of you make a choice to join a film school. Why have you chosen a career in lighting or film or whatever it is you do? After I'm finished talking, perhaps I can answer some questions, or I can hear from some of you so you can tell me what your decisions were, what made your decisions easier to join a film school. I want to talk a little bit about directors for a second. My favorite director, without any shadow of a doubt, is Andrei Tarkovsky. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of him. He made 7 feature films before he died in 1986 of cancer. And I'm sure a lot of you weren't even born in 1986, if I'm not mistaken. My choice for his best film, I think, in my opinion, was Stalker. And very sadly, the rumor has it, I believe that it was on Stalker that he got the cancer that killed him, because 7 others from the same film died of the same cancer. Every single one of his films is a remarkable work of art. I also like Ingmar Bergman. Through the Dusk Darkly, Seven Seal, Wild Strawberries, and later Fanny Alexander. If you haven't seen all these films, I absolutely suggest you do. There are 3 reasons I love these films. The stories, for sure, and because of the 2 cinematographers that shot them. In the early films, it was Gunnar Fischer did his early films. The high contrast that jumps out of the screen at you, like the painter Caravaggio, and very bold camera angles make these films still watchable today. And then in the later films, Sven Nykvist, who made the camera like an anonymous character in the story. Another chap I would like to mention is Abbas Kiarostami, an Iranian director. 2 of his best films, in my opinion, are 10 and A Taste of Cherry. 10 is a great story about a cab driver or a woman who's driving around Tehran, and she picks up 10 different passengers, and it's the dialogue and the conversation that they have together. For me to look back, when I was growing up, I grew up in Canada in the 80s, being so close to the mighty US of A. You can imagine the USSR back then was a great propaganda target. You can imagine what I mean by this. I grew up thinking all Russians looked like the Gruffalos. But for me to look at the Soviet films of Tarkovsky and Nikita Malakov and Kiarostami in Iran when I was a young boy, I could see the human value of these places. It gave me an entirely new perspective of what was happening around the world. I looked at propaganda and I developed my own politics through these films. Painters I'd like to talk about as well. The obvious ones, I've mentioned Caravaggio, Rembrandt, who uses softer light in his paintings and an inward sort of feeling. This is the same difference I feel between Gunnar Fischer and Sven Nykvist, by the way. Others worth mentioning are Vermeer and Edward Hopper. Get to know who these people are. Everyone has different opinions of what's interesting and what catches their eye. There's always room for subjectivity in art, otherwise it would be pointless, I imagine. The reason I mention paintings and film references is that they will be the starting point for you anytime you meet a DP before a project starts. He or she will have been on the project long before you, and they will have ideas of how the film will look. Paintings and film clip will be the launching pad for everything you do in the future. If you have not already done so, I suggest you create a knowledge base of these references. This is your career, it's not a hobby. Ask yourself about all the learning and research that a professional person has to go through. A doctor, a lawyer, an architect, think about what they must learn and how often they have to update their knowledge base. This is you now. You're being asked to be a professional filmmaker. Setting goals for yourself will really help you focus your attention on getting results. Where do you see yourselves in 5 or 10 years? You're going to have to think about all these things. Setting goals and setting targets for yourself, this is the fastest way to make progress. Take courses, attend seminars, go to Cameramage and meet people. Has anybody here been to Cameramage? Okay, get to Cameramage. It's in Bidgosh every year in November, I believe. It's a cinematography film festival. It's absolutely amazing. One day the DOP you meet at a bar in Bidgosh might be shooting a commercial in your city, and guess what? They're going to call you. So now that we're all working on sets, there are a few principles for us all to learn. Still very basic, but they must be understood. Things like the exposure triangle, aperture, shutter, ISO, ASA, the difference between f-stop, which is focal length, and t-stop, which is transmission. Lens perspective. On set, you're going to do a master first. Then you're going to do a mid, then you can do a close-up. And then you're going to do the same thing looking the other way. You have to know what these lenses are seeing. You can't be standing around a monitor all day looking. You have to know what's going to be happening in what order. So understand what the lenses are doing and what they look like, and what the cinematographer and director are trying to accomplish. You have to be prepared. Other things like three-point lighting, etc. Do you know what these things mean? It's super important. It's super important that these concepts are understood. Has anybody here heard of high dynamic range?
Yep.
Great. What about the virtual reality cinema experience? Soon, you can be a character in whatever movie you're watching. Gaming is going to be the first format to develop this. But once the stitching technology is improved, it won't be long before you can be your own superhero in an all-action blockbuster. LED technology, especially the sky panel from ARRI, and process mapping, DMX, RDM, these are all terms and emerging technologies that will dominate your future. Get to know them. Take ownership of these terms, because this is a minimum standard for your knowledge base. You will be expected to completely understand these principles. Make no mistake, all the people around you who are competing for the jobs you're going to be going for, they will own these concepts. When the clapperboard goes down and action gets called, for me, that was the most exciting time of the day. Everything must be focused. The actors are delivering their lines, and they take themselves very, very seriously. If it's a stunt, then we're only going to get 1 or 2 takes. These people are putting their lives on the line. This means no mistakes. If there is a mistake, it had better not be the lighting department. I had quite a moderate start to my film career. I was able to learn and progress quite gradually. Some of you might not have that luxury. I suggest you get cracking. Don't take shortcuts. Go out, make mistakes, get your sleeves up. If you do make mistakes and it ends up looking good, please try and remember how you did it. You might want to do it again. Could end up being some of your best work. I had a great time meeting people and learning everything I could as projects got bigger and bigger and more demanding. I made many friends along the way. My very first feature was around 20 years ago, called Shooters, a gangster film. I met the DOP and managed to convince him that I was the man for the job, even though I had no idea what I was doing. The job went well, and we're still friends over 20 years later. My father told me something when I went for my first job interview, and you might want to keep this in mind, and that's that nobody knows what you don't know, unless you open your big mouth. I've gained so much knowledge since that first film, knowledge that I really wish I had before I started, but I suppose that is what made everything fun and exciting. As I gained experience, knowledge, and confidence, I would be paying very close attention to what was happening. You learn to recognize what's important and what patterns are developing. At the end of the day, it's a very systematic process. Each department must do their thing without pissing off the rest of the film set. Each department has a task, and these tasks are broken down into locations, scenes, days, blocks, whatever you want to call them. I always broke every project into these smaller components. Otherwise, you can be overwhelmed by what looks like an impossible task. Most of the year, I would be shooting commercials with at least 1 or 2 feature films. I always preferred to be on the feature film sets. The tempo of films, the discipline, it's a marathon. You really have to pace yourself. Commercials were great for training with your crew, I have found. Short-term projects where you can practice getting things done quickly. You don't generally get many actors on commercials, so you can learn to move equipment around the set in a safe and efficient manner. This pays off, believe me, this pays off when the shit hits the fan and 5 leading actors on a film are watching you pull off some impressive maneuvers. A 20 by 20 frame in the wind could give you a heart attack if you don't know how to deal with it. There are some feature films I will never speak about, and some I've never even watched. I always realized that I wasn't paid for my opinions. That's one of my favorites. These are sky panels in our branch in ARRI, and this is a little philosophy. Is Game of Thrones popular here?
Yeah.
We supplied all the lighting equipment for the first 5 years of Game of Thrones. Where was I? I realized about the films I was working on that I wasn't paid for my opinions. I was there to put the lights up. So whether the script is good or bad, it's not for me to talk about. I was only there to do the job, and that was to make sure that it looked as well as we could do. But I do feel very privileged about some of the films, Eastern Promises especially, with David Cronenberg and Peter Sadisky. Under the Skin was one of my last films with Jonathan Glacier, who's an absolute genius. And 24-Hour Party People was about the music scene in Manchester in the early 90s. You can imagine the chaos on that show. So there are some other very important things to talk about, and I'd like to spend just a few minutes talking about them. Things like planning, when you have an opportunity to be on the recce. I always like to think that there had to be not just a plan A. The recce was probably the most important time of any film and any commercial. You've got a few days, a few weeks to go to visit all the locations with the heads of department, with the director, with the cameraman, and then you go back there with your team afterwards and you make sure that you've got everything covered. You had to have a plan A, a plan B, and plan C. You'd be absolutely amazed how often plan B gets used and even plan C. When I made equipment lists, and if there's any producers in the room, please hide your ears now, because when I gave equipment lists, there was always 50% more than I needed. 50% more labor, 50% more lighting, booms, etc. Because I knew when I went back to them, I was going to lose 25% of that. And then when we got started, I was probably going to lose a little bit more. So at the time the film actually got rolling, I still ended up with more equipment than we needed, but it's for that plan B stuff. It's for the plan B and plan C. And if you've lost a location one day, because I've got an extra 5,000 pounds in lighting in the truck, or I've got an extra few labor guys, okay, film saved. So that one maneuver for the sake of 5,000 pounds will save you going back to a location, getting actors back there, getting the location again. That's what that 25% contingency is for. I've found really that a lot of DOPs plan meticulously every single last detail. They like to be in total control of what was happening, not just on the screen, but in the planning and in the day-to-day activities. But there were some people that made it up when we arrived. DOPs like Robbie Ryan and Robbie Mueller and Dick Pope. They very much liked to arrive, see where the camera was shooting, see how the sun was shining before they made their final touches on their filmmaking, on their lighting process. For me and for the lighting team in particular, this is the nightmare. But there were cinematographers like Daniel Landon, Bill Pope, Peter Sadisky. They were in total control, and it didn't matter what was happening. That's what the lighting was. We had to fight the elements if that was the case, and we carried on with the procedures. So there's a few different styles for different people, and you have to get to know how to work with them and how to anticipate. Another thing that's very important is choosing your team. If you're a gaffer, then choosing the sparks and the practical electricians. These people represent you. You can't be everywhere. They represent you on set. They have to be sensible people who can work hard and who also know what they're doing. Practical electricians, more and more you're seeing, especially with LED on set, we're seeing practical electricians even more than the shooting crew electricians. Sometimes I was on a set a few weeks ago and there were 35 practical electricians putting LED strips all around the ship on Star Wars. I found that as I was coming through, I was first choice gaffer with maybe 2 or 3 cinematographers, second or third choice with a few others, and I had a great relationship with production supervisors and producers, so when DOPs were coming from out of town, I also got calls from them. So with your crew, you're not going to always have access to your first choice people. So get to know a lot of different people and have a reliable and efficient team that you can call on. To summarize everything, I just say remember this: there are a crazy number of technical rules and set protocols that you're going to have to commit to memory. But don't worry, day after day, as you're working, these will become second nature. Some fun things to do with friends, I would suggest: make a movie. Try a different role. I shot 3 shorts, as I said, and 6 music videos as a DOP. And on most of those projects, all the people were stepping up to a new role. That's very exciting, and it's a lot of fun if you can get it done. Also, when you have some free time, practice lighting for interviews. Just practice with friends. Get a camera, get lighting setups, and just practice. Whatever looks good, get to know what your taste is. And I guarantee you'll have a lot of fun doing that. The most important thing I can mention to everybody is after you've learned all of these rules, then I suggest you break them as often as possible, because nothing really interesting came about from following the rules all the time. I'd like to show, if we can have the lights for just a second, I'd like to show a couple of files that I've got. And I'd like to close by just saying one thing. Some of you might not ever think about anything I've been talking about ever again. There are plenty of short films and low-budget TV projects to work on, and lots of people needed for those. But there are a great many feature films and high-end advertising commercials that need a reliable team. If any of you want to email me or call me or visit me in London, I would be more than happy to help you make decisions or give you advice. The last 2 slides I'm gonna show now, so if I can have the lights a little bit, I'd just like to show a couple of slides. So these are some slides from Under the Skin. Has anybody seen Under the Skin, the Jonathan Glazer film with Scarlett Johansson? It's really an unusual project, and some people were very confused by it. So this is something I would do with the cinematographer after the recce. I would go through the entire script, take all the recce photos, and attach it with a script analysis with what my production and what my team would be doing, what our responsibilities were. So after all the recces were finished, I would go through the entire script and make a dossier like this, and give that back to the cameraman so that he or she, every day we were turning up, they would know exactly what we were doing, and there was no discrepancy about what our equipment was, which way we agreed to shoot. So the night before, he or she could look at this and we could talk on the phone, or we could talk about what was coming up. It was always a great tool to be able to talk about whatever difficulties might be arising or whatever changes might happen. We can always go back and refer to this, and at the end of every day I would also take notes of what happened in the day and add them to this dossier so that we can constantly update it and refer back to it whenever we need it to. There's another one I'd like to- Take this one. So this is another version. I'll make it smaller. This was another version from the very last film I worked on called A Little Chaos. The director was Alan Rickman, who's no longer, sadly no longer with us. But this is another slightly evolved and slightly different version of the same thing. If we can click through the different pages. So that was the script of what was happening on day one and location one. No. Yeah, so it's that's the call sheet. This is the equipment that we're using that day. And this was probably the most useful tool that I could offer as a gaffer for the cameraman. After the recce, when you're standing in the recce, you've got a GPS location of what's happening, and you can see exactly where the sun's going to be in any part of the day for a second. So all these little files that were collected and put together and handed in a dossier. So you've got the script, you've got the extra equipment that's happening that day, you've got the sun path of where the sun's going to be, you've got the rigging equipment, the access equipment. I always find that other gaffers I was working with they weren't providing anything like this. So anytime I met a cinematographer and gave them this, whether it was somebody I was working with regularly or somebody new, they would take this and they would evolve this themselves, and they would look at this and think, what a great tool, what a great aid it is, because every single thing is in a packet that they can look at and they can understand. Come on again. So after I joined ARRI, I realized very quickly that there was times like this time now, even though I wish I could do it more often, there were things that I wanted to give back to the industry, and I set this short film package aside. So there's this and a list of equipment. So on our Facebook page, I've got this equipment listed for free for any cinematography students, any focus puller, any cinematographer that wants to make a short film. Anybody that wants to use this kit, all they have to do is call me at ARRI or call our team at ARRI, provide insurance and provide public liability insurance and equipment insurance, and you can take it for free. You can book it. It's been going for about a year now, and it is booked every single week. Every week, some different group of young people come and make shorts, make films, commercials for their showreel. And I'm really happy to give back to the industry a lot of the knowledge and the experiences that I had, and this is my small way of giving back to the students in the UK. If you're visiting the UK and you want to use it, get in touch. You can have it for a week, for a month, however long you need it for, but come and make shorts. What I ask is that they give back the finished article, and I'll stick it on our website. I'll plug it for you. So there's been, I think, 15 films that have come back, and I've been able to plug them and to give them more exposure. Anyway, thank you everybody. Thanks for having me. I hope I didn't ramble on too much. If there's any questions anybody would like to ask, I'm more than happy. I'm also I've got some business cards here if anybody wants to come and take some. If you're ever in London, please come and visit me at ARRI. I didn't talk very much about ARRI, but I wasn't asked here to speak about ARRI. It was as a gaffer. So I'll answer any questions that anybody wants, and thank you for having me.
Thanks.
this, if anybody has questions or you want to stick around, this is the short film I did as a DOP. It's quite strange. I did 6 feature films with Keira Knightley, and I got to know her and her boyfriend really well, Rupert Friend at the time, her boyfriend. And they approached me and they said they were doing a short. This is Rupert on the right. There's no dialogue to this, but he asked if I would be the DOP. I agreed. This is an example where everybody stepped up to do a role that was unfamiliar to them, except for her. This is Keira as a fairy. But I'd never done anything as a DOP before, but I had a team around me, a focus puller, a gaffer was one of my sparks, who kept disappearing. Found that interesting. I also had moments where as a DOP, I didn't realize how many people are trying to talk to you and how many people are trying to get information from you. So it was driving me mad. I used to go up a ladder and pretend I was taking light reading somewhere just to get some peace and quiet. But I had an enormous amount of fun shooting this, and everybody did. It's about 10 minutes. As I said, there's no dialogue, so we can just watch it in the background. But the confidence you get, I think, from understanding everybody else's role was a great asset to me, and to understand more about the struggles and the problems of a DOP. It gave me a lot of insight, and it helped me to be a better gaffer. I'm sure of that. Now, it's not a very nice title, but it's meant to be lighthearted and meant to be a comedy. Maybe we can do it with a bit of sound. So obviously this is a model unit. The whole thing was about as big as this platform here. Can I ask while we're watching, how many people are cinematographers? What about the lighting team? Anybody who's going into the lighting department, lighting gaffer? What about the rest of you? What other parts of the film? Tell me some other parts that you might be interested in. Producing? Yeah. So you didn't hear that part about the extra 25–50%? Another really fun part of this for me was the fact that it was shot on film. Digital cameras had only, this was 7 years ago. Digital cameras had only, the D21 was out, the first Alexas were just hitting the market. So it was shot on film, on 35mm. But the most exciting part for me was the post-production and going to the lab in London to look at all the different ways that they could fix my mistakes. Did anybody in the room play ice hockey as a boy, as a young person? Anybody?
No, mostly play basketball.
Basketball?
Yeah, let's say it's more basketball.
Because Lithuania are playing in World Championships here in Vilnius tonight, playing against Japan, I think. So there's different pools. There's an A pool, which is Canada, Russia, Czech Republic, etc. And there's a B pool. Lithuania are probably going to win the B pool. There's some famous players in Canada that came to play in the pro leagues from Lithuania. Darius Kasparaitis, for one. I was hoping to go tonight, but I've got some work to do, so I'm not gonna go and see it.
And please think about your questions while we're just watching this movie. This is the rare opportunity to have them answered by a professional.
I think I have one question. May I? My film has very. Film is. I need to turn on my English vocabulary. It's a very bad for film to be underexposed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you are taking meterings with exponometer, yeah, you are taking exposition from the face, yeah.
Yeah.
And how many stops low can you go for the fill light for the film still be properly exposed?
So are we talking about film or digital? Digital now?
Film.
Well, that's probably the last project I did on film,
Uh-huh.
7 or 8 years ago. Everything else now that I shoot, or I was shooting after this, was digital. So you've got on the Alexa, for instance, especially the Alexa 65 now, you've got a 16 stop latitude in exposure. So you can pan, you can be on. Film could do it, but a lot of the early digital cameras had a real problem. The Genesis, for instance, they had a real problem filming in a stately home, for instance, and you're filming inside the room and then you pan to the window. It just couldn't handle it. It completely washed out. So you had to know as a gaffer, of course as a cinematographer, if you're going to be doing that, you've got to get frames, neutral densities, or do whatever you can to that window, or bring the level of lighting up inside the room to match, so it's a closer latitude. But to ask that question about how you do the fill, I mean that's an artistic question, I think, really. If you're shooting on digital, you've got a lot more latitude. If you're shooting on film, then you're going to need to read what the shadow. How much do you want to see? You know, that's an obvious question. If you want it to go black and you want it to be mysterious, or if it's a romantic comedy, you want to see everything. You've got a much deeper depth of field, so you're shooting it much higher at 5.6 or 4. Most of these romantic comedies are shot at. Drama or suspense, it's much lower contrast, and there's much more mystery. So it depends what kind of project it is you're talking about. But I think it's about your taste. But for your light meter. You're sitting on your camera. You decide what you want to see. You've got a spot meter you can do from your camera, or you can get up and take an incident reading with your meter on set. But I suggest that you do all those things before the actor arrives, because when they sit down, you put your meter away and you start filming. That's why you have stand-ins, you have doubles, you have people like that.
Maybe it is possible to be safe, avoiding the underexposition by a little bit overexposing the film,
Yeah.
like taking a meter from the face, which says maybe 5.6 up, and filming on 5 or 4.5, and saving. I don't know. Just I have a question that because I'm going to light filming the film.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit scared of that and exposing the shadows.
Well, if I could be very very bold and say that people are going to be looking at the actor's face and not the shadows, I wouldn't worry so much about the shadows.
Ah, okay.
I would let experiment with what you're doing, and bracket. You know, if you do 3 takes, you know, change the exposure a little bit. Or make sure you get a little bit of fill, or just a little tiny, they've got so many little tiny strip LED lights now that are clean daylight, clean tungsten, that you can hide behind a chair that'll lift up a background. Just experiment. Always experiment, make mistakes.
And imagine like filming a night set, which is supposed to have a moonlight. And the lamp we are going to have is not very strong. It's 1.2 HMI, yeah? And we cannot bring it too far because it's going to be too weak.
Yeah.
And but we want to keep the shadows of people standing in a similar direction. Like having one light here, we have like shadows shifting. Yeah? And if I would like to keep the shadows going to the same line, is it possible to fake it with two lights in parallax or something?
Why is the, first question is, why is the lamp such a low wattage? Is it because you have to plug into the wall, or because you can't get a...
No money.
Yeah.
Yeah, no money.
Yeah. And is it a HMI or a tungsten?
HMI.
An HMI, a 1.2. Well, I'm sure there are lighting companies that you can go and visit them, introduce yourself, and ask them for 5K, or ask them for a blonde. For a shadow, you want a clear glass instead of a Fresnel, but just ask them. Get a relationship with the lighting companies. Go and visit them, and be a guy that phones them, and ask them about equipment lists, and then send back their equipment after you've used it with cables wrapped up and in good condition, and they'll remember you, and after you get a relationship with them, they'll give you whatever you need. You can get a 2.5. You can get a 2.5 in a wall without any problems. So tell them you need a 2.5. Ask them nicely. Try that.
Yeah, that's impossible.
That doesn't answer your question about shadow.
Yeah.
But again, play around. Do a pre-light. Do a pre-light before the project starts, and just practice.
No, because I was thinking very soon, and maybe in at the evening when we are going to have like a lesson, may I come to you and ask the scene is it possible?
Of course.
So for now, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, everybody. These pictures were taken over the course of 20 years or so. I had a lot of fun working on set, but my priorities are different now, and like I said, I put my kids to bed every night, and I still get to visit film sets occasionally, and I still get to answer questions like this, which I'm more than happy to do so. Starting very soon at ARRI in London, I'm starting to give seminars on softboxes. ARRI have introduced a sky panel. Has anybody ever seen or worked with a sky panel? Have you seen them before? It's ARRI's new LED technology, and it's absolutely the future of filmmaking. Small tungsten lights are going to disappear. Small HMI lights even are going to disappear. LED and process mapping are without a doubt the future of filmmaking. So it's the reason that ARRI are going to introduce a technology that is cutting edge. That we have seminars to teach people how to use it. So if you're ever in London, please come and see me, and I'll take you through a demonstration. But new technologies are coming out very, very quickly. The large format digital, red camera, Netflix and Amazon, they insist on shooting 4K for reasons that I don't understand, but ARRI didn't have a 4K camera. So this year they've come out with the Alexa LF, which is large format. Now you can shoot 4K if you need be on an Alexa camera as well. But ARRI also have the Alexa 65. This is a much higher production camera for feature films and high-end commercial budgets. But the LF would be geared towards dramas, Netflix, Amazon, Facebook. All these, Facebook are starting to do original content the same as Netflix. So you can look around your production slate and you're going to see a lot more in the future. These are the sky panels here. So this was a night shoot with, we were looking for, that was before we started filming. So a big soft light, and you can choose the different gels depending on the color. Night is, if it's a drama and it has to look real, then you should have a natural looking color. But if it's a fantasy or science fiction or something unusual, you don't have to choose. You can choose any color you want. You can be as original and stark and be be bold. You don't have to follow formulas. It's more fun and exciting if you're breaking rules instead of following them. But you're going to see a lot more often in the next few years, not just Netflix, but Amazon, Facebook, and a few other original contents are really going to be the production companies that are going to be coming to town or setting up studios, etc. Well, thank you very much. Anybody else have questions?
Before you start showing us short film, there was a picture with the steps, with the sun steps, which going through
Yes.
through the day.
Yes.
What kind of application you using for
Okay.
for you?
Well, that one's called Helios.
Helios.
So look up Helios. It's by some friends of mine. They live and work in Los Angeles, called Chemical Wedding. So they do Artemis for focus pullers. Artemis is a depth of field chart, etc. So they make Artemis, but they also make this one called Helios.
Helios.
That particular one is Sunpath. So
Okay.
there's two, but
Some part Helios. Any additional applications which
lots.
helping you through
Lots.
through the working day?
Yeah, lots.
Lots.
Too many to list, but come and take my card. Email me and I'll send you a link to all of them.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of clever people are coming up with tools. It's a technical world now. A lot of clever people are coming up with tools that are very, very helpful. Check them out. I'll send you all the ones that I know of.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and in the movie of that two guys, there was a triangle under him lips. Right there. So what's that mean? That symbol on his lips over there.
You know, I asked the same question. So I can't tell you. I have no idea. Sorry about that.
I would like to ask. I have kind of a weird question, but I would like to hear your opinion. Is it possible to work with lighting when you are female? Because now it's kind of sexism in Lithuania, and what do you think? Is it possible to be as a gaffer or gaffer assistant?
No, it's a very good question. That's not a strange question at all. In London, there's a great organization called Women in Film, and with producers, directors, cinematographers, gaffers. A very good friend of mine, Carolina. She's a German gaffer. She does very well in England. She's had the same complications and struggles, but of course, I think it's absolutely. I would encourage that.
And
100%.
maybe you have some advices or just tips how to start with all these things when you're a female?
Now, would you like to start as a gaffer or a spark? I think
More like gaffer.
a gaffer, yeah. Well, I find for gaffers, myself included, when I was looking for sparks or talking with sparks, they knew that I was qualified electrician. They knew that I had all the qualifications imaginable. They knew that I understood electricity, and that gave me credibility. So I would strongly recommend the head of a department should be qualified. So there could be courses, there could be even basic courses to start with. If you want to be at the head of a department, you should be qualified. So I would start with that. And once you get that, that'll change all the electricians' opinion, because they know that you're not just trying it for a few years. If it doesn't work out, you're gonna stop. You've made a commitment with your time, with your effort to get something, that'll let them give you the commitment that you want. So get qualified and then start on small projects and build a relationship with a cinematographer or a director or a producer. But I don't think there's going to be anything that can stop you if you really want to do it.
Okay, thank you.
So do we have one last question?
Maybe just one. Can I? In your opinion, when HDR, when everyone is going to use HDR, and how you adapt the lighting to it? And does it different from today's when HDR will be on? And
Well, with high dynamic range, you, if anybody doesn't know, what you're able to do is zoom into a part of the screen, and then you can blow it back up again, and the resolution and the quality is still going to be as good as it is on the original. With the lighting, it's a question of like I spoke before, is it a drama, is it a science fiction? The lighting still has to be at a decent stop for exposure. But if you're going to go into a part of the screen and pull it out, there has to be information there, so you have to have enough light for exposure.
so HDR will require more light. Or, for example, for the same scene.
As a gaffer and as the guy who's renting the lights to you, I would say most definitely you need more lights. But again, it's about experimenting, and it's about going and testing.
And in your opinion, when it is going to hit the market? And
HDR?
yeah.
Well,
For example, like 4K, everyone is trying to use.
well, the trouble with all this brilliant and excellent capture medium is it's great, we can capture it and we can collect all the information, but how do we get it onto the screen? Are we advanced enough? We're starting to be advanced now to project onto the screens and to get all that information we've collected onto the screen for people to watch. So that technology is catching up. But the first technology that was quite remarkable was the capture medium. Now we're starting to be able to project it.
The last one, like
No,
the percentage.
I'm going home tomorrow morning, so I can answer questions all day. Even after we leave here, if you want to ask more questions, I'm happy to.
Okay, so in percentage, how many % do you prepare and you're sure what you're doing, and how many % on the set you are jazzing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say 80% of everything has to be prepared. But from a gaffer standpoint, the cameraman's asked me, and the director and the location manager, we've looked at scenes, and they've asked me, we're shooting here and we're shooting here. But I can guarantee you on the day, the director's going to be looking at the sky and thinking, whatever they think, and saying he wants to go up here. So if I haven't put some power up there, or put some, this is the extra 25% that you can argue with, that you say, why have you done that? But if the director says he wants to go up there, then I'm ready, and I'm going to be ready in 10 minutes. Everybody else is not going to be ready, but I certainly will be. So I would say 80% I've done that I know is happening. 20% I would always do to, just in case. But I could do that on a luxury, on a film, and on a shooting crew, because we're the shooting crew. When we're finished, we leave, and another crew comes in behind us to tidy up. If you've only got one crew, then that's hard to do. But if you only have one crew, you have to go to the director and the cameraman and the producer and say, come on guys, we can't be going up there. We don't have time. If we go there, then tell me, what are we going to drop? We have to drop something if we're going up there. So that kind of dialogue, and how you learn how to say that with respect is also very important.
Yeah, to meeting the ground.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I used to have producers ask me very often, John, why do you need all this stuff? And I said, I don't need any of it, you do. I said, if I can't have it, then okay, let's go and, you can't have this and you can't have that. I said, okay, that's fine. Let's go and tell the director and ask him what scene he wants to drop. and then everything changes after that. Because it's not up to me to say what we can't have. It's up to, if we can't have it, then I'd like the producer to break the news to the director or the cinematographer. It's not up to me to do that. So you can use that one.
Very good one.
There's a couple more secrets that I have for producers, but not for now. I can tell you later if you like. I can't give everything away.
Yeah.
Listen, thank you everybody. I've enjoyed talking nonsense for an hour or so.
Thank you. It was interesting to hear.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Tai va, tai mes toliau tada tęsime su teorinė paskaita, kurią praves Ramūnas Greičius. Aš dar noriu jūsų paprašyti, čia lapas, kuris keliauja, yra reikalingas sponsoriams šito renginio, tai jūs pasirašykit, kad dalyvavote.
Gal padarom 10 minučių pertrauką, kas nori paklausinėti dėstytoją.
Paimti vizitinę, nes nepabėgtų.
So we have a short break for people to come to you personally, reikia visi nori. Ir tada mes tęsim, po teorinės paskaitos kieme bus autobusai, kurie veš tuos, kurie mokosi šiandien workshop'e. Sėsim autobusai ir važiuosim į vietą, organizuoti, tai kažkaip tais neišsibarstykit. Autobusiukas.